Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have construction needs? Maybe you have roofing needs, these recent storms. Maybe you need to get your roof looked at, or maybe you want to build a pergola. Check out K&H Construction in Waxahachie. Chris Helms, he's a local man, been here a long time. He'll hook you up. Let him know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest is the Waxahachie City Manager, Mr. Michael Scott. How are you doing, sir?
Fantastic, DV. How are you this evening?
I'm good. I like to have you on every year, just kind of around budget time, etc., just to update the things. The city manager is the non-political part of the city. The day-to-day running of operations falls on him. He's got to make it happen every single day, of course, with a lot of staff and stuff, but all the wheels turn and he's the one that makes it happen. So I love having him on the show because of the specifics you can get from him. And I hope that's informative to you guys. Thanks again for coming on the show, Mike. Can you give a quick bio for those who don't know you? Because it's kind of grown a little bit and we will talk about growth.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah, it's great to be back with you again. And of course, we've done this for a number of years, and I always enjoy getting back on your show. So thank you for this opportunity. Just by way of like a quick bio, yeah, I've been at the city now for about 24 years. I've worn a number of different hats throughout the years. I've been city manager now since 2017. And I tell everyone who's willing to listen that it's a great place to work. I'll tell you, I've enjoyed every day. It's such a neat community that really supports our city organization. And we've got a great city council. And so it's been a joy to serve the community in this way.
Yeah. And you've seen a lot of change. 24 years is a long time. And then as city manager since 2017, you think about everything that's happened from there to here, and the growth and a new city hall, there's so many things that happen. I wanted to go ahead and kind of just get going on it last year. And one of the things that we talked about in every single show was roads and the amount of money and stuff that goes into roads, etc. Last year you had some projects you wanted to address. How are we doing with those?
Yeah, we're continuing to make progress. I just by way of kind of just a history, there was a city council that was in office, I want to say maybe 12 years ago, that asked the question, hey, we've got all these aging roads. What's going to take to kind of start making headway on them? And at that time, we were looking at about $80 million worth of roadway construction just to kind of upgrade these old roads. We're a historic community with historic roads, and they need some attention. And so since that time, and including this past year, we continue to clip away at those roads. Every year with the CIP project, the Capital Improvement Plan, we have a number of roads that need to be rehabbed. Of course, as a growing community, not only are you rehabbing, existing roads, but you're also looking to the future and saying, okay, where are our growth sectors and what roads we need to build new to open up those areas. So yeah, last year, like I said, no exception to the past, we continue to make progress on some projects that were teed up. One of our projects that has been in the works for year after year is a Bellevue edition, which has a number of roads that all like simultaneously basically need to be repaired. And unfortunately, we can't afford to replace the entire neighborhood's worth of roads. I think probably the residents there probably appreciate that too. But systematically, we've clipped away at those roads. And I'm pleased to say this next year, we have our final project in Bellevue edition, and we'll get out of their way, and they'll have brand new roads, that they can enjoy and utilize.
Every year I like to ask you the number, the number I'm talking about. And what's that big number if you to catch up, because you can never really catch up because the roads are constantly being used, but to catch up, what's that number?
Yeah. So every year, I mean, this next year we've budgeted another almost $11 million. And those are rehab dollars, DV. In addition to that, those are associated with a bond that we'll talk about here in a second for next year. I mean, it's $11 million, but that also doesn't include new construction where we've used impact fees to build new roads. So really, all in all, I mean, our streets budget is pretty hefty, just given the number of projects that are out there, and so it easily hits over $15 million worth of roads this next year.
Talk to me about growth, because it's something that you can see, and developments and planning and how have you made it easier? Because small businesses, there's also small business open. Have you made it easier or done some things? What's going on with getting permits and stuff like that? Is that kind of running? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so getting permits, we continue to look at our processes internally, because certainly we like to think of ourselves as still kind of that small town charm, and we can provide that white glove, customer friendly service. And so we really try to work with our small businesses to get permits turned out as easily as possible. Certainly there are health and safety issues that you can't overlook, and that really need to be a part of that permit process. And so really we try to hold their hand through that process and get those permits issued, because certainly it's good for us as a community just to encourage, mom and pop type businesses to redevelop and to grow and be successful.
What's been the biggest challenge keeping up with the growth in the business, just in business? Because we'll get to the other growth.
Yeah, we have so many folks that are looking to be in Waxahachie. It's a great place to do business. We continue to be a regional retail center for, not only the county, but probably multiple counties around us. Hill County, Navarro County. Our numbers continue to show that we have a catch area much larger than just Ellis County. It's certainly much larger than Waxahachie. So it's a desirable place for businesses to set up and to do business here. And so it's really finding a location for everybody, because it's no secret, right? 77 is nuts. And it's because of that growth, and because of those traffic counts. As a business who's looking to relocate, or a new industry or new business wanting to come into our community, they look at traffic counts. And so they think, oh, well, 77 is where I want to be. And the truth is we're running out of real estate on 77. And so we're continually looking for opportunities to push some of those businesses off of 77 and enlarge that footprint of, where folks can go for retail shopping, and where they can still, a good business, business can thrive and still do well.
The plan. I know that there was a strategic plan that the city went through, or a few years back, if not last year. Talk to me about how we're staying with that plan and how you're implementing it.
So you're talking about our comprehensive plan,
right?
And that is, and that's a great question. So every 5 to 10 years, a city, really about every 5 years, you should look at your comprehensive plan and say, okay, is it still relevant? Does it still reflect the values and the priorities of city council? And so we went through that process just a couple of years ago, and really there were some wholesale changes in that. As a community, we're now up over 50,000 people. And we're blessed by having a lot of land, a lot of raw land. We have over 50 square miles of land inside the corporate city limits. So there's lots of opportunity for people to spread out. And that sounds great, other than the fact that it was a long-winded answer to your question. But
no, that's fine.
Other than the fact that they really, what you're talking about when you do that is sprawl, because people want to keep moving out from the city center. Well, that requires infrastructure to be extended out further and further. So those big capital improvement numbers we were talking about just a second ago continue to grow, because you're trying to reach out and capture all that development that's occurring outside the city center. So in that comprehensive plan, it kind of turned our methodologies that we've used in the past of sprawl to on its head, and said, okay, how can you develop in closer to your city center, utilize infrastructure that's already in place, redevelop lots that are maybe on the ground that have been either underutilized or not utilized to now, and maybe look for some redevelopment opportunities as well, and really increase that density, which is kind of a word that people don't, that kind of makes people shiver a little bit. Like they don't think, they think Waxahachie, they think, well, we really don't want density. It's relative, right? So for Waxahachie, it'd be more dense, but for like a Dallas or super urban area, it would not be considered real dense. But the idea is you're putting more folks in closer to town, utilizing those lots and that space is available closer to town, to where you're not spending the dollars to reach out with infrastructure to capture those areas that are outside the city center.
Now, you talked about infrastructure. Other than roads, there's a lot of infrastructure that the city deals with. How are we doing with wastewater? How are we doing with water? What's going on with the city with that?
Yeah, roads gets talked about just because of two things. One is it's visible, right? You see it and you appreciate it every day when you're driving around. It's also most expensive, but you're right. In addition to roads, you've got storm drainage. You've got, which of course, when we have these torrential rains, people clamor about, oh gosh, my road, my yard's flooding or whatever, or the infrastructure for the drainage is not adequate. So that's certainly on people's mind. But the water and sewer, people like to have a toilet that flushes and a faucet that runs, and those are expensive. And not only is it the pipes in the ground near the residence or near the business, but it's also what happens downstream, whether it be the distribution or the treatment in the providing of the water, or the treatment and the collection of the sewer. both have such large expenses on the other ends of those pipes that people don't necessarily see or can really appreciate the cost of.
Kind of shifting gears, staffing, because in order to make all these things happen, there has to be staff. How have you continued to run the city as far as, recently in this last year? Are we running lean? Are you trying to get some people hired in these different departments? Because you're over all of it. So tell me about our hiring and our staffing.
So currently, we're about 450 full-time employees, which is a strong workforce. I would not call it heavy in the sense of being overstaffed. I think it reflects the values of the community. So if the community wants a level of service, really we don't make widgets, right, at the city. We don't produce a product other than water, but we're really in the service business. So if they want a certain level of service, it requires personnel to provide that level of service. And so we've kind of tried to keep up with that expectation. As a growing community, like I said, we're over 50,000. We're growing at right around 4%, 3.5%, 4%. And so we're growing. And so we do need to keep up with those demands. I love to talk about our staff because we have a phenomenal staff. I mean, and I've mentioned, before to you and your viewers that in the last several years, we've been able to hire folks that are so heavily credentialed and experienced that want to be here. They see the exciting things that are happening in Waxahachie. They see that it's still a great, charming community that hasn't kind of outgrown its, and become anywhere USA. It's still a very unique culture and a place that people want to be, and they want to have their thumbprint on the community. And that's why folks get in the public sector business to begin with, is because they want to serve the citizens and make a difference. And we've got folks that just come in and they bring an incredible amount of experience to bear in this community, and it's really served us very well.
Waxahachie is really getting on a map of the big DFW, getting really noticed, and just 30 minutes south of Dallas. It's definitely getting noticed. Our little big town that's going, but it almost seems like you never stop. But it's budget time coming up, August, September. You start really getting into it. Tell me about some of the priorities that you wanted to present to the council for next year's budget.
Yeah. So as far as budget goes, you're right. It's kind of wash, rinse, repeat. I mean, it seems like as soon as we finish one budget, we're diving into the next year's budget, and this year was no exception. I mean, that's just kind of what we do. And so we actually started early spring with those discussions with staff. Our first budget workshop with City Council was April 15th, just to give you an idea of how quickly things start. Early in the process, and when you have an October 1st, fiscal year start, we start several months before that. Really, it's to have a conversation with council and make sure we understand what the priorities are. Are we still doing the same priorities that we've done in the past, or have things changed? Are there things that have now grown on their priority list? And this year, it was actually a really good conversation, because one of the things that has come up, which it's been mentioned before, but maybe not to the level that it has, is it's really just providing some relief to our homeowners, which is, of course, something we all want to do. And we try to be, good stewards and fiscally conservative in our budgeting, but really make that a priority as we go into the budget cycle. So early in the process as we can have that conversation, the better, because then when that sets the tone for how we kind of handle our entire budget. So this year, on April 15th, we had that first workshop. It laid out, of course, public safety continues to be an important priority, managing the infrastructure, the aging infrastructure, managing the growth, and of course, quality of life projects, which everyone loves, the trails and the parks and so forth. But it was provide some homeowners relief. So at that meeting, in fact, later, very soon, we're going to be putting before council the official adoption of looking at increasing our homestead exemption, which is a great way of providing some relief to the homeowner without really gutting your tax rate to the point where you can't do some of the things that we need to do. I mean, we've got so many roads, we got police and fire to hire and to continue to serve this community. So you can't just go in and say, hey, at all costs, we're going to reduce the tax rate. But there's ways of doing it in such a way that the homeowner sees some they see council's intention and sees that we're trying to do right by them, but also maintain a certain level of service. So leaning on the homestead exemption was one of the priorities that came out of that meeting, which was fantastic to have that conversation. And so again, certainly that'll be part of what folds into our budget. But then is really laying out, okay, what capital improvement projects are our highest priority this next year. And then, as you mentioned, we've had put before council the initial step of issuing bonds this next year, which lays out kind of some of those capital projects that we'll be funding later this summer.
Yes, since you did mention it, last council meeting, you requested for a bond. What was that bond for? Are we going to be able to get good rates, because interest rates are interesting? And before you were able to get better rates when you were issuing these bonds, is it going to cost us more? Just kind of give a breakdown of what this bond's going to do.
Right. So what really drives our interest rates, and I'll start there, is our bond rating. And we are very fortunate that we have a AA bond rating, which is very high. It's phenomenal as far as the rating agencies are concerned. They view us as a very minimal risk because we've got a strong fund reserve. We also budget very fiscally conservatively. We've got a good investment strategy. We're not, like we're just talking about, we're not overstaffed. We're kind of right sized for our community. So they look at all those factors. And so a AA bond rating is where we ended up, and we've been that for some time. So that really drives the interest rates that you ultimately get. Certainly the market is a large part of that, but they look at what your bond rating is to see what type of credit risk you are. We expect to get a very, very competitive interest rate this year. Of course, it's going to be better than what you or I could get, or anyone else in the open market, just because it is tax-exempt bonds that the city issues. And so we will do that later this summer. That item at the last council meeting is the first step of posting for the notice that we intend to issue debt later this summer. So there's a whole process to go through before it goes to the Secretary of State for approval, and then we'll issue those bonds in August, or actually I think that the adoption will be in September. And so, yeah, we'll move towards those projects. But yeah, in that bond issue, DV, we have almost $58 million worth of projects. And of course, I'm talking about not just general fund, but also water, wastewater. So water, wastewater is funded through the tax rate. So that's the only source of revenue really for water and wastewater is through the tax rate. So we obviously charge a rate for the sewer and charge usage on our water, and a portion of that goes to fund those bonds. And so of that 58 million, I'm looking at my notes here, about 10 million will be water and wastewater related projects. And a lot of it relates to growth. It relates to rehabbing existing pipes that need either upsized or have deteriorated, that need to be replaced. And so that's what those projects are related to. The remainder is general fund, which really runs the gamut, and that's what people are most familiar with. Parks and planning for fire stations and those sorts of things makes up the rest of that bond issue.
Mike, with all the growth, are we having any capacity issues? Where we're at when it comes to capacity and sewage?
Yeah, we're good. It's on our radar because we're getting up there. TCQ, who's the regulation body over our water wastewater systems, stipulates that at I believe it's 75%, you begin 75% capacity of what's available to you. Once you reach that, you've got to begin engineering for expansion, and then at 90%, they expect you to be under construction. And we're not at that point yet, but we actually are moving ahead with those conversations to plan for it, because those projects, the next sewer plant expansion is probably going to be, well, it definitely will be the largest project the city has ever undertaken, likely to be about $100 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm forgetting the exact million gallons a day capacity to be added. But it sounds very minuscule compared to $100 million, but it does provide you a lot of growth runway going forward. But yeah, $100 million just between just the cost of things and these projects are just incredibly expensive.
Michael, when it comes to those sewage plants, is it something that we're looking to expand our current plant? Are we looking to make another plant somewhere on another side of the city? How does that work?
Great question. We actually went through the exercise a couple years ago of looking at that, trying to explore that exact question. Does it make sense to expand our existing footprint, or do we look downstream and say, okay, we're growing. Does it make sense so everything can gravity flow further downstream? And the decision was made that really it's probably most economical to go ahead and expand our existing footprint. We have land there, and expanding that footprint to provide the growth. We believe there's enough room there on that site without just abandoning our existing one or starting complete from scratch and building a second plant further downstream. We think it's better just to expand our existing plant.
So going back to some of the other stuff, what is the greatest need you see right now before you go into budgets, the greatest need that the city that you see that has to be funded or we really should be considering funding this year?
So, of course, there's a lot of very worthy projects, right? And going back to that April budget meeting, That's really what lays out the priorities. I don't set the priorities at the city. That's where I leave that to the city council. I may have one opinion. They may have a different opinion. I get trumped on that one, and their priorities take precedent over mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we want to make sure that we're on the same page. So I will say this. So public safety continues to be very high priority. I mentioned tax relief through a homestead exemption was a priority, but also, there's been a very active group out there as it relates to animal services and providing a better shelter. So that has gotten traction with city council that they really wanted to see that happen. And so we have been exploring ways of addressing that concern. And so we have some money in this next bond to do just that. And we've looked at a couple of different scenarios between building and renovating an existing building to building from scratch. And so we're still kind of working through those conversations, but there is money in there to address that growing need.
There's been different posts, and I'll stay on that one. There have been some different posts where people are complaining about where they're what they're gonna do with these dogs that they find just abandoned. And there's always, there's a lot. Unfortunately, people don't know either how to keep their dogs in the yard or they don't know how to spay or neuter. There's something going on in this county where there's really a big need for somewhere where these pets could go. And so what does that look like, though? Opening up, do we have an animal shelter? And if we had to open it up, what does that look like?
I was just going to get up my soapbox here. So you teed this up perfectly for me, DV. I appreciate that. We do currently have an existing kennel shelter for animals that is, I want to say it's 15 shelter or 15 kennels. And then it's where it has a cat room as well. And it's at capacity. It's smaller than it needs to be for a community of our size. So clearly it would need to be expanded or a different location with additional kennels provided to really meet the growth. But my soapbox really revolves around this is I think there's an expectation that once you open a new shelter, that's going to solve the problem. And I've been in this business long enough to tell you that's not going to solve the problem, because what's going to happen is we're going to add additional kennels. Let's say we add 50 kennels. Okay, we're at 15, we go to 50. Within a few months, if not sooner, those kennels are going to be full.
Completely.
And we're going to have this exact same conversation then at essentially a larger, higher operating cost to maintain those 50 kennels than what we're paying right now to maintain 15. Now, granted, it gets more animals off the streets and provides opportunity for folks to bring animals in, but the conversation is still the same. As we're growing as a community, that shelter is going to be full. And then when word gets out that the city of Waxahachie has built a new shelter or has expanded a shelter or what have you, it becomes very attractive for animal lovers and animal owners to think, well, I'll just take my dog that I want to relinquish to Waxahachie because they have a brand new shelter. Well, that'll be great for Fido to, we'll just put him in that shelter because it'll be a nice shelter for him. And so it becomes like a magnet for additional dogs. So I just want to manage expectations that by building a new shelter, it's not going to solve all concerns that are out there. But you were exactly right. Spay and neuter is a big part of that, kind of what our practices are as far as how long we retain dogs and cats, and just try to maintain a shelter that has animals that are adoptable, that we can find and rehome them in a good home that's kind of the best scenarios where you can provide that opportunity for folks to come by and adopt a pet. And so we hope to be able to do that.
A partnership maybe between the city and maybe a nonprofit to have a spay and neuter drive, because some people, they don't do it just for the simple fact that they can't afford it, and that's that's just not good. The problem keeps getting bigger, so maybe something like that could happen. Maybe that would help. Now, I didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but I wanted to definitely get to it. How are we doing other than the AA bond rating? How is our debt right now, and how, our expenditures, are we good for a balanced budget? What is that looking like?
So what we're talking about this next year is holding our 61-cent tax rate. And so of that 61 cents, if you recall, our tax rate is actually made up of three portions. We give a portion to the library, but then you've got M&O, which is our maintenance and operation, and then our INS, which is our debt service. Mm-hmm. So really those are the biggest parts. So of that 61 cents, 2 cents goes to the library. So now you call it 59 cents that we have to play with between O&M and INS. And so 23 cents of that is debt service. So it really, and that number ideally, DB, is lower, just to be honest with you. I mean, it'd be great to have that number lower, because then you've got more dollars going to your operating budget. But again, you got to consider other factors. I mean, one size does not fit all for every community. And so someone like a rating agency may say, well, your debt levels is pretty high. We say, well, you're right. we're a growing community that is building roads and building sewer and building infrastructure. And so it has to be funded somehow. And so we believe in generational equity, where every generation is paying their share. And so debt allows us to do that, to where when you pay your tax bill, a portion of that is going to pay for that road out in front of your house. And people who move into the community are also doing the same. So you're not shouldering the entire cost today for someone who's going to enjoy that road 20 years from now. So we actually are, again, it'll come a long-winded answer, but we're doing well. We have a strong fund balance, so we're good there. We go through a very, our finance director is phenomenal. Chad Tussison does a great job, and his team does a great job of kind of walking us methodically through the budget process to look for opportunities to cost save, but also kind of different ways of doing business to make sure that we're not just spending money to spend money. Hey, it's in the budget, let's spend it. We don't do that here in Waxahachie. If it's in the budget and doesn't get spent, we pull it back and basically say, okay, that's going to go to our fund balance moving into next year, and you need to justify some dollars to put back in your budget next year. So it's not this cumulative deal where you hear about government waste and they're spending all the dollars they got in their budget for this year because it's there. We do not do that here.
But we're carrying a little bit of debt, but we're also growing, is what you're saying.
Yep.
I guess that's part of it, right? As a growing city, you got to provide some stuff. How many, and we've talked about this before, like getting a new fire truck, and that's like 1.2 million or something now, or billion. It's just some crazy number now. Is there anything like that's coming in the horizon? Are we looking to hire more officers or fire personnel in this coming year?
Yeah. So yes to all the above. We actually, and fire engines are over $1.5 million each nowadays, which is phenomenal. But it's also taking 3 to 4 years to manufacture them. So we're having to really polish up our crystal ball and say, okay, what's our needs going to be in the future, and when's this truck going to expire that I need to replace it? So we're really having to kind of plan ahead to make sure we have truck orders in queue to where our delivery dates hit when we need them. And so that's happening already. In this next budget year, we actually don't have a fire engine this year, but we already have, I think, 2 or 3 in queue right now with our provider. But we are looking at adding police and fire. The exact number hasn't been determined. We have our operating budget meeting with the city council July 7th. We're looking forward to having that conversation with them to see kind of where those numbers shake out. The staff makes requests every year, and then I try to cull that out and say, okay, what can we do without? What do I want to put in the budget to propose to council? It's incumbent upon me to present to council a budget, and I will do that at the July 7th meeting, basically saying here are the requests this next year that I think are worthy of consideration. And so that would include some police, some fire, some other personnel here at the city that I think are necessary, again, to maintain current service levels. And so police and fire are a part of that. And but as far as also public safety, we have a very active emergency management team, which, as many people know, we had the train derailment this past week, and our emergency management team was running point on that recovery and that response. And doing an incredible job.
Hold on. Tell me about that call. How did that call go down when they called you up and say, "Hey, Mike, you got a train derailment in town"? How'd that go?
That was about it. Yeah, it was about 12 o'clock on Monday night. Thomas Griffith, our emergency management director, calls me and said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm sleeping, Thomas. Thank you." And he said, "Well, I'm heading to town. We got a train derailment." And I said, "Okay, I'll meet you there." And so, that just started the round the clock response, really, between, again, Thomas and his team, emergency management. Marketing communication was involved with that. Police and fire, obviously, we had fire personnel there around the clock. Police personnel, streets department was out blocking streets. It was very much a coordinated effort, and I appreciate the opportunity just to say we have such an incredible team that the response and just the coordinated response was phenomenal. And I think that's why it really kind of went down as smoothly as it did. Of course, they're still cleaning up there right now. We're finishing up hauling off some of the empty train cars, the UP is, and hopefully life will resume back to normal here very soon. And we appreciate so much our citizens' just patience as you respond to that. I mean, of course, no one plans for that. But I will say, as emergency management, they help us with preparedness, and they've done a great job of, like, it's not a question of if these incidences are going to occur, it's when and to what magnitude. And praise God, we did not have a catastrophe type of incident. I mean, had there been a leak, Had there been, a tragedy of some sort where there were injuries or worse, it would have been a completely different conversation. And luckily it wasn't that severe. It was inconvenient more than anything. But their response is phenomenal. And we're ready for something if, like I said, God forbid that was to happen. But anyway, long answer there. But as far as the budget goes, they've asked for a mobile command unit this next year. So that's one of the big ticket items in our capital improvement plan. That's also in the bonds is mobile command unit that would be on site in an incident like this. They'd be able to roll out and set up and have communications, have everything they need to respond to these incidents, as well as be available for we've got these large scale events downtown. Bob Phillips or our Texas, it's our Go Texan event with the Department of Agriculture, which we're very proud of. In the fall, that's our big event, and they'd be available for those type of festivals as well. So that's one of the big projects that emergency management has requested this year.
I want to thank those guys those guys and ladies that did that job. They, that was a big one. And that's one of the things I told my wife as we were watching the news. I said, honey, if that fuel escaped the hazmat nightmare that would be, that would shut down that area for God knows how long. And I'm just so grateful that is not what happened, because I understand the hazmat side of it, and that would have been bad.
Right. You think about the perimeter you'd have to set up and the business that would be affected. Yes, there were some businesses that were affected by this just because of crossings and so forth. But the perimeter that would have been set up for that, you're right. The impact would have been just much larger than folks I think you probably can even imagine.
And I want to encourage people to go ahead and support your local businesses around there. They did take a little bit of a hit because of kind of how the traffic normally moves and how it had to move because of this. So support your local business like Vita Coffee, etc. Some of those businesses over there. Give them some of your love. Well, on my show, my guest always has the last word. Unfortunately, we got to cut it short because we both have someone we got to be. So, I'll go ahead and give you the last word.
Well, thanks, TV. And again, I so enjoy having these conversations. And, again, at the city, we are all about transparency. And so having conversations like this, that we can go and dig into the budget and say what's in there, what's not in there, how it came together, I appreciate, and hopefully your viewers do too. And we're growing as a community as we talked about, but we try to still remain very accessible and just a phone call away. And certainly if there's things that we can do differently or information we provide that helps kind of give clarity as to what we're doing, we don't want to be looked at as some secret agency that's doing something behind closed doors, because that's not what we're about. I'd encourage folks just to reach out and say, hey, I want more information on this. And we'd say, great. And also, I would just also encourage folks to get involved. We have lots of boards and commissions that have vacancies. What a great way just to serve your community in a different way. So if you have an area of interest, chances are we've got a board that probably, might scratch that itch. And so reach out to us on our city secretary's page of our website. You can sign up for that. And every September we appoint new board members, and we'd love to get you involved. So again, DV, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you coming on. These details are amazing. So thanks again. Can you stick around after the show real quick?
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, sir.